One tip for anyone buying audio equipment. Now, over a period of time, audio equipment can deteriorate, especially things that have, let's say, tubes in them. Now, what happens is the tubes will obviously go bad over a period of time. It could be 2 years, it could be 5 years, it could be 10 years, it could be never. But how do you actually know when the tube goes bad or is going bad? Now, the thing with it is a lot of gear can deteriorate over a long period of time, but it's hard to tell at what point it should be kind of a tube should be changed, for instance. Like I've just recently changed all the tubes in my SPL iron. Now I've had the SPL iron maybe 4 years, and there's no real way of telling, are the tubes good, are the tubes bad. They're not actually, they don't sound bad, right? But there's one little tip, and this is how I always tell whether something like tubes need changing. When I buy a piece of equipment, like let's say when I bought the SPL iron, what I do is I run some drums for it. I've run some a full track for it, and I've run various different tracks. Then I record what comes out the other end. So we're going through the converter, through the SPL iron, for instance, and I record what is going back in through the converter. Now I have a piece of audio with a new piece of equipment. Now that is my reference. What I then do is once a year, I'll go through all my pieces of equipment and I'll reference it back to the original piece of equipment that I had. Now this is, this is a long process, once a year, something to do. But what it does is I can then listen back to that piece of audio, reference it to how it's sounding now, and see if there's any dramatic differences. With the SPL iron, when I did this recently, I noticed a very small difference. There was a small difference, but it was a noticeable difference, and it felt like the tubes were going slightly bad. So I swapped them out. Then when I recorded it back in just now, what basically happened was I've got the same exact audio as when I first bought it. So I'm like, okay, right. That's a one way of working out if you've got bad tubes, something's deteriorating in the, something might be going bad. There might be some distortion that's added into it later down the line, and you don't know why. And the only point, you might not hear that. It might not be something that's kind of easily noticeable. For certain people, they're looking out for these sorts of things, but for certain people, they're not looking out for these things, and it might just be like, oh damn it, I'm printing distortion, I didn't even know. So having a reference point and knowing how your gear sounded on the day that you bought it, or a week after you bought it, let it run in a little bit. A week after you've bought the piece of equipment, is it the same as when I bought it? Is it the same now as when I bought it a week after buying it? And this is just a good way of working out and having a reference point of whether that piece of gear has deteriorated over the course of 3 years or however long you have had it. This is something that I do every time. So it's basically a case of you buy the piece of equipment, after a week, just have a select set of tracks, just pass it all through, just at the same settings, just literally pass it through and just monitor and see what comes back. When you buy the piece of equipment, what comes back should be sounding great. So everything should be good there. Then when you do it a couple of years later, for instance, it should literally be pretty much exactly the same. And that's what you want to hear. So if it sounds the same, your tubes ain't gone bad. The piece of gear is as it was 2 years ago. So this is just one little tip and one little thing that I do. And like I said, it's a time-consuming process. If you do it every year, it might take you a couple of hours, maybe once a year, but it's well worth it because it gives you a definitive answer of whether your gear is as it was last year when you did the referencing. So yeah, one little tip, and yeah, something I do every year. It's worth doing.